Welcome to Handstand 101. I'm going to be telling you guys everything you need to know to get started with handstands as a complete beginner or someone who's been practicing for a while. Where I want to get started is exactly what you'll need to get into a handstand practice. So whether you're doing this at home or at the gym, these are some things that you should probably get equipment-wise. One would be a hard surface. So if you're practicing at home, you want to make sure that you can actually have a surface that is hard and not soft. You're always going to do much better on harder surfaces. So carpet, probably not super good. Next thing you'll need is a wall. I highly recommend a wall because it's going to allow you to do a lot of the drills that I'll be showing you later on. That will be pretty necessary in getting you in the middle of the room, which I'm sure is probably your goal. And the last thing I'd recommend getting is a stick. A stick is going to be your best friend if you really want to master the handstand. This could be like a broomstick, or maybe like you play golf or something, you use a golf club, any type of like stick that isn't super heavy, that could work totally fine. That's what's great about the handstand. It doesn't require a lot of equipment. Another thing to keep in mind is if you're somebody who has wrist injuries or shoulder injuries or dealing with current shoulder or wrist injuries, I'd be very cautious getting into your handstand practice and just making sure that all these things are kind of feeling good and healed up before you like start taking this seriously, because the handstand's really hard on your wrists and your shoulders, especially if you're starting off at least. So I want to start with what a handstand is exactly. So I like to reference a handstand in relation to what it's like standing right side up, because they're actually very, very similar. If we look at what's happening when we're standing right side up, the only way we're able to stand up without falling over is that we can get the majority of our weight, just kind of like this area, over our feet. Once that weight moves back behind the feet or too far forward over the feet, we fall, and we have to move our feet in order to catch us. Otherwise, we can just like fall over. So handstand's the same thing. We need to get the majority of our weight over our hands. So flip me upside down. My feet are my hands, knees are my elbows, hips are my shoulders. So center of mass over base of support. This can look a whole bunch of different ways. There's no like specific center of mass over base of support. Like, you know, if I'm standing up, I can stand up and have my center of mass over my base of support like this. I can stand up, I can stand up and have my center of mass over my base of support like this, like this, like this. Same thing with the handstand. That is the only one major rule, is that you can get the majority of your weight over the hands. So I'm going to do a quick demo just to kind of like prove this concept to you, that the handstand doesn't have to look a certain way. So this is ideally what we think of when we think of a handstand, but look at this. Oh, center of mass fell out of the base support. Look at that. What about now? Center of mass is still over base of support. I would still call that a handstand. What about now? I'm still balancing. Center of mass over base of support. So it doesn't have to look any specific way. Obviously, we're going to be going for having a straighter position because it looks nicer. But that's just to prove that the main thing that's needed is just the majority of your weight being over your hands. And it doesn't have to look a specific way. But if you are thinking about having it, look nicer, the majority of what's going to be making your position look bad or good, I'd say about 85% of it is going to be coming from the shoulder. So a lot of people might have some misconceptions about handstands taking a lot of core strength, or you have to have super strong abs, or you need to like tuck in your pelvis super hard, and that doesn't play nearly as much of a role as the position of the shoulders, and I'm going to prove it to you. Sometimes tucking in the pelvis and maybe like trying to crank in the ribs can change the position a bit, but from my experience, I've seen that the majority of what your position looks like is based on the positioning of your shoulders. And now I will prove it. So I'm gonna show you a position where my shoulders are more closed. Closed meaning they're less open, they're less in like a more flexible position, they're less overhead. So this is what that would look like. And it's a bit hard to tell because it still looks like my shoulders are stacked over my wrists, but all I'm doing here is closing the shoulder. And this is about what my handstand looks like. And look, I can still balance, right? Oh, I didn't get to show you. Here. Take a look where my shoulders are at. This is about the angle of my shoulders in that position. Then let's take a look with a more open position. So I'm gonna get in the same position I just did. Now all I'm gonna think about is opening the shoulders. That's all I'm doing, all I'm thinking about. And you'll notice changes what my position looks like drastically. This is about the angle of my shoulders in that second position. And you'll notice that it changed what I look like completely. So the main things you need to be doing in a handstand, and this will depend person to person. Some people will be naturally more flexible. Some people won't. Like I've seen a lot of girls, especially who already have open shoulders. They don't really even need to necessarily think about cranking the shoulders open more, but everyone could always afford to think about elevating the shoulders more. So something I like to show also is if we want to lift the arm further back behind us, you need to let the shoulder blades move up towards the ear. So if you try to move your arm back behind you with your shoulder blades pushed down, so you're intentionally pulling your shoulder blade down, and then you try to lift the arm, you'll notice that it almost feels like there's a block. So when you elevate and you let the arm move behind you, it allows for more room, and it also keeps you a lot more stable when you're doing your handstand. So when you're doing your handstand, you're always thinking about shrugging the shoulders to the ears. For some of you, you might have to go with the intention of pulling the shoulders open. For others, usually the more like flexible girl, you probably won't have to think about it too much. But that's why it's also super important to take videos of yourself, because you might have one idea about what your position looks like while you're doing it. You're like, oh damn, I feel like I'm kind of doing good. And then in reality, it could look completely different from what you think. So it's really important to take videos and then look back at the videos and be like, oh damn, that's what I look like. Okay, that wasn't even what I thought I looked like, crazy. And then you get that feedback and you're like, oh, okay, so that's what I look like when it feels like this, it looks like this. Then you go back, take a video, do it again. It's like, oh, when I do this, it looks like this. And then you start to build up this awareness of what your positioning looks like in a handstand. That just kind of goes to show that the positioning of the shoulders is going to change what our position looks like in a handstand, and the majority of straightening out your line or whatever is going to be coming from the shoulders. You can think about things like tucking in the pelvis, tucking in the ribs, and that will make like some minor changes, but majority is in the shoulders. So with that being said, all the concepts finished, I want to get into how to warm up properly. One of the main limiting factors for the handstand will be your wrists. Your wrists don't have a lot of muscles in them. They're basically just bone and tendon and ligament. And so, although that means they're maybe a little bit stronger, they're also a lot more susceptible to injury. They don't heal nearly as fast. So we always want to be super intentional in making sure the wrists are warmed up and also warming up the shoulders, especially getting used to trying to lift the arms overhead and flex and elevate the shoulders. So like doing things like stick lifts or shrugs, which I'll kind of demo in a bit. So this is what you're gonna do. You're gonna get your hands on like some type of hard surface, and to get the most out of stretching out your wrists, you wanna think about cranking the pits of your elbow forward. And then from there, the more that you push your shoulders over your wrists, the more of a stretch you're gonna get through the wrist. So I like to move through like 4 different positions. You can do this, you can turn the fingers facing back, you can turn the fingers facing to the side, and just kind of like move through some motions there. And then one of the most important warm-ups I feel like for the handstand is called a first knuckle raise. And one of the main things that you're gonna be thinking about doing in a handstand is using your fingers, and your fingers run up and connect to your forearms. Well, basically all the muscles in the forearms control the fingers. So we want to get a really good connection to the forearms, and that'll help us when we're making adjustments and doing some of the next drills against the wall. So to do a first knuckle raise, you're going to get on all fours, and you're going to think about lifting the heels of your hands off the floor and making sure there's some weight in your hands, and you're thinking about pressing the entire finger on each of your fingers down into the floor. So you're not just like pushing the fingertips down, you're pushing the entire finger down into the floor to lift the heels of the hands off the floor. And then when you're doing these, you want to make it like pumpy. You want to look for a burn in the forearms. And so if you're not feeling a burn in the forearms when you're doing these, you need to move more weight into the hands. So if there's no weight in the hands, I'm just back here. I'm not really like moving my hand against anything, but here I'm moving the heel of the hand up against the weight of my body, and that's gonna have my forearms working a lot harder. So I would go for like 20 reps there, just freaking cranking it, get a really good burn in the forearm, and that'll get you nice and connected to the hands and the forearms and ready to go for the next steps. So I typically spend about like 5 to 10 minutes warming up the wrists and maybe like 5 minutes warming up the shoulders. One of the best warm-ups you can do for the shoulders is warming up this flexing and elevating of the shoulders using stick lifts. And there's like tons and tons of benefits to doing stick lifts other than just warming up the traps, which are the muscles that move your arm back behind you and shrug the shoulders to the ear. But I just want to go over the warming up of the traps for today. So to do a stick lift, you're going to lie on your belly. You're going to get the stick out in front of you. And then some things you want to think about is keeping your chin against the floor the entire time when doing this. And that'll kind of prevent like any compensating through the upper back. So like kind of extending through the upper back while you lift the stick. And you can just focus on lifting the shoulders so chin gets on the floor. And then you want to think about shrugging. So you're kind of scooting the stick away from you. You're towards the wall. And then lifting the stick. Keep reaching away and then coming back down. If you're someone who's super flexible through the shoulders and you feel like this is super easy, another intention you can think about is tucking in the pelvis, but you don't want to tuck the pelvis so hard that the hips start coming off the floor. You just want to tuck it in enough so that the abs are lifting off the floor and the hips are still in contact with the floor, so you're flattening out your back. And that'll challenge your traps a ton. The exact muscles we need to be warmed up for our handstand. So that's what I would consider super easy warm up before doing your handstand work, which will greatly help you in your practice. So one of the main things that you'll need to make sure that you can get down is the bail. You need to be able to fall out of your handstand. Otherwise, you're gonna kick up and you're gonna land on your back and you're gonna be done with handstands forever. So that's something you need to make sure that you feel super, super confident in. Some of you guys will have no problem with the bail. They'll just be like freaking daredevils and you'll be like falling over and it'll be no problem. And then there's another set of people who are just deathly afraid of getting that weight of the hips, that center of mass over the base of support. And the more that you get the weight of your body over the hands, if you're someone who's afraid of falling, the scarier things are gonna be. So the main thing that I'd recommend for you to get over your fear of falling is just to practice the bail against the wall. So I wanna show you what the bail actually looks like. The bail looks like this. It's essentially, if you start falling over, you know how to fall to the side rather than on your back. So let's say I'm kicking up, I fall over too far, whoa. I can take a step and kind of fall to the side. And you need to have that freaking dialed in because like I said at the beginning, if you want to get a handstand, you need to get the majority of your weight over the hands. And if, for the most part, if you're someone who's scared of falling, the more that weight comes over the hands, the scarier it's going to be. So this is an unfortunate reality that you got to just freaking face your fears and get the bail dialed in. So that's what the bail looks like. This is how you're gonna practice it against the wall. And this is honestly the main drill that you'll really need to be doing in order to practice the bail. Some other things you can do to supplement with practicing the bail is something like cartwheels. So the bail looks very similar to a cartwheel, so just practicing cartwheels. It's a super fun way to kind of get used to falling to the side. But this is the main drill that you're gonna be working on. And what's cool is it's really scalable. So if you're super scared, you can practice this. If you're kind of getting over your fear, you can practice this. It's all dependent on how close to the wall you're getting. So this is what you're gonna do. You're gonna get your hands on the floor. You're gonna push this top foot into the wall. And you're just gonna walk as close as you can to the wall. So let's say you're someone who's super scared. This is the closest you can get to the wall. I've seen people even like freaking all the way out here, even more, because they're freaking out. You just get to here, you hold it for a couple seconds, and then you just practice pushing the world away from you. Imagine you're trying to get your feet closer to the ceiling, and then you just fall to the side. And it can look any different way, but you're just getting used to like, all right, when I'm on my hands, I don't fall on my back, I fall to the side. And every time you do this, at your own pace and at your own comfort, you're trying to just walk a little bit closer to the wall, a little bit closer to the wall, a little bit closer to the wall, until you can get your chest all the way up against the wall. So that's one of the main things that I would look to be mastering in your handstand too, getting the chest all the way up against the wall, and then bailing, because the more that this weight, center of mass, gets over the hands, the scarier it's gonna be, but the more it's gonna replicate the handstand. So the last test to make sure that you've kind of got the bail on lock and you know you can move on from the bail is that, number one, you can get your chest all the way up against the wall, and then number two, you can make yourself fall off the wall. It's like you're gonna fall on your back and then fall to the side. So if you can do that, to me, you've mastered the bail. You can totally move on because you were literally falling over and your brain had the reflex to boom, hit the bail and fall to the side. So that's a non-negotiable. That's one of the main things that you need to master before moving on to a lot of these drills. This is like one of your main focuses. So that's the bail. Now I want to talk a little bit about the kick up. So a really cool thing that I learned from my personal coach, Learning to Human, Erdy. I have most of my information that I've gotten from him about handstands. I've worked with a couple other people, but I'd say his methodology of things definitely made the most sense to me. Kick up, you need to look at like a different skill from the actual handstand because it is a different skill than the handstand. So a lot of the time, there are people who can find balance off the wall, but then when they come into the middle of the room, it's a lot more difficult for them to actually catch their handstand. And that's because catching the handstand, you need to go through the kick up motion. And if it's something that you haven't practiced enough, it can be hard to kick up into a spot that you can actually balance in. So you always want to just get continuous reps of the kick up. I usually do it at the beginning of any handstand workout while you're fresh. So I want to go over the kick up. The purpose of the kick up and what we're trying to do with the kick up is set as many things into place as we can before we kick up, because the more things we set into place, the less likely things are to go wrong. So let's say I start my kick up with my shoulders behind my hands. That's one thing I need to do in order to get my weight over the hands. I need to jut the shoulders forward in order to get the weight over. And that makes it a lot more difficult. It's one more move that I need to make, which can go wrong. Another example could be like, let's say I bend my knees when I kick up, right? They just bend. That'll be one extra thing I need to do, is straighten the knees. And I can do it because I've been doing handstands for a long time. But if you're a beginner, all these little things can add up and make it a lot harder for you to stick a position that's balanceable for you. So the main things that you want to set into place before you kick up, and that I'd recommend working on, just picking like
one or two cues to put your focus in on every time you do a kick-up session. First one is getting the weight over the hands, so shoulders over hands. And then second one I'd focus on is shrugging the shoulders to the ears as much as you can. And setting those two things into place is going to be much easier for you to kick up into your handstand, because it's two things that you've already set into place. It's less likely for things to go wrong. So there's a couple other cues that you could be thinking about depending on who you are that I won't get into because it's very nuanced. Like some people will have to focus on one thing, some people will have to focus on another thing. But I would say those two cues are really good to focus on for most people, especially as beginners. Just get that down. So in terms of like levels of the kick up, there's three things we can work on in terms of levels for the kick ups. So if you're someone who can't bail, then you're just not kicking the hips up very high, because remember, the more the weight comes over the hands, the scarier it's going to be. So as a beginner who's afraid to bail, or not even as a beginner, but just whoever's afraid to bail, you're just doing small kick-ups. You're just getting used to the feet coming off the floor and you getting some weight in your hands. Next level would be you start getting the hips a little bit higher. So you only want to do this once you're confident you can bail. If you can't bail, then you're kind of asking to fall and land on your back. So make sure that you can bail before you do this second progression. Second one is just trying to get the hips over the shoulders and kick up a little bit higher. And you'll notice when I'm kicking up, I'm always trying to kick up into the split leg position. Because when I'm in the split leg position, I have a lot more leverage. I can use this back leg almost as like a counterweight for the weight of my hips. So this position here is a lot easier to balance in than this position here, because I have that weight of my back leg to counter the weight of my hips. I have like a little bit more leverage to find that sweet spot, right? So we're always trying to kick up in that split leg position. And level 2 is just trying to send the hips up a little higher. And a note that I want to make about the kick up is, let's say you have two people. You have one person who kicks up, and every time they kick up, what am I doing? And every time they kick up, they fall back towards the heels of their feet. Or not the heels. Anyway, freaking out of breath. So let's say you have two people who are racing to get the handstand. You have one person who, every time they kick up, they fall back towards the floor, like right away. They fall back towards the feet. Every single rep. You get here, kick up, fall back towards the floor, right? This will be kind of what your kick up looks like before you know how to bail. So don't worry about it. You need to get the bail down first. And then the second person, they know how to bail, and every time they kick up, they fly over. So they get here, they kick up, and they fly over. The person who flies over is going to learn the handstand a billion, zillion, gazillion, drillion, billion times faster than the person who falls back, because the person who's kicking over is always falling through a spot that is bounceable. But the other person who's always falling back is never even like getting close to a spot that they can actually balance in. So you always want to be striving to kick over more than you're falling under, because you'll know like you're falling through a spot that you can actually balance in. So that's something to keep in mind after you learn the bail and you're working on your kick-ups. Try to get more reps of you falling over than of you falling back. Last progression of the kick-ups that you can work on after you've gotten a decent amount of reps of your kick-up in is you can start trying to slow down the descent of your legs after doing a kick-up. So you get here, you kick up, and then coming down, you try to slow down the feet coming down towards the floor as much as you can. And now you're starting to really strengthen up your traps and get a lot stronger through the kick-up motion, right? So that is the third progression of the kick-ups that you can start working on, and it starts to get really heavy when you start to slow those feet down. All right, so that's the kick-up. Now I want to go over
the next concept of handstands. So this is also a concept that I've learned from Erdy. The way that I explain it is pretty similar. A handstand is just generally you making constant little micro corrections. You're always trying not to fall forward and you're always trying not to fall back. So if you practice this with me and you do it standing up, if you start falling forward towards your toes, you'll notice that they start kind of pushing into the floor to keep you from falling forward. And if you push your toes into the floor, it brings you back to a spot where you're centered. And if you start falling back towards the heels, whoa, you'll notice that your hips, the center of your weight, the majority of your weight, it tries to stay over the feet. Even as you lean back, you'll notice that like your hips are trying so hard to stay over your feet, to try to keep the majority of your weight over your feet so you don't fall over. Like just slowly leaning back, you'll notice like the upper back leans back a ton and the hips are just like sticking out because they know it's like they have to stay over the feet. And that's just handstand is just physics. Whoa. So the first correction that you're gonna need to master in your handstand is learning how to bring the weight from going over back into a spot where you can balance. And the way that you're gonna do that is using the fingers. Just like we use our toes standing right side up, we use our fingers when we're upside down. And then when we're falling back, remember our hips are our shoulders. So if we wanna move the majority of our weight back over the feet, we need to use our shoulders to lean forward in order to save us. A little bit too is like the heel of the hands, but you're mainly gonna be thinking about using the shoulders. These two drills are gonna be like the bread and butter of creating a handstand that I'm gonna show you. And there's a ton of variations of them, but you don't need to really worry about that right now. You just need to get used to the concepts. When I'm falling forward, fingers, 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 fingers. When I'm falling back, shoulders, 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 right? So first drill is teaching you the correction when you're falling forward. It's called a heel pull. So you're getting in your kick-up position. I'd say get around like 2 hands distance away from the wall. You can kind of mess with the distance based on like your height or what feels comfortable. But something to keep in mind is the further away you are from the wall, the more weight that you have going onto the wall. Just to keep that in mind. So you're gonna kick up, boom, get onto the wall, and then you wanna think about, all the cues we've been talking about, shrugging the shoulders to the ears, flexing the shoulders if you need to. And then from here, you're gonna bring one leg off the wall. You're gonna freeze everything, freeze your freaking body in space and time, boom. And now all you're doing is pressing the fingers into the floor and then relaxing the fingers, going back towards the wall. Press the fingers, relax the fingers. Press the fingers, relax the fingers. And you're just getting used to like, oh damn, when you press the fingers into the floor, brings the weight from off the wall. So if the wall wasn't here, obviously you just fall over. But because the wall's there, we can get used to having the weight being too far forward over the hands and learn to bring it back to a spot where we can actually balance. So that's a heel pull. That's something you need to freaking get down. Get down, 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 down. I just want to put in a note here for those of you who might be a little inflexible or not used to like opening the shoulders enough to get into a nice looking position. This is a good thing to work on if you're one of those inflexible people. If you're like a flexible girl, skip it. Don't even need to look at this. Or at least if you feel like you can't get into a straight position, because there are definitely flexible girls who can't get into a good position. But anyway, something you can think about if you feel like, you're looking a little bit more like this when you're doing your heel pulls is pulling the chin to the chest before you start your set. That'll set up a nice looking line. And then going for your set. Just a little note on the heel pull. So, got to get the heel pull down, master that correction of, when the weight's going too far forward, fingers, 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 fingers. Now, what about the shoulders? Now to learn the correction of the shoulders. So to actually work on this correction,
you need to make sure that you can bail. You need to make sure that you can bail, otherwise you're gonna be in a position where the majority of your weight's over your hands and you're gonna fall over. You can see me repeating bail over and over again because, I mean, that's how you stick with this practice. You don't land on your back because that happens and it's really disheartening. So I don't want you guys to fall on your back and hurt yourselves. Anyway, so you're gonna get your chest up against the wall, and then now you're leaning the shoulders forward to bring the weight off the wall into your hands. So now the wall is representing us falling back. So if the wall wasn't there, I'll show you what I mean. So now if the wall wasn't here, I would fall back, right? So it's a good way to teach us how to pull the weight from being too far behind the hands into a spot where we can balance. So you're here, you're gonna pull one leg off the wall, and then all you're gonna do is lean forward until that other foot pops off the wall. And now to stop myself from falling over, I'm digging the fingers into the floor, just like a heel pull. And if I dig enough, I go back to the wall. Something to keep in mind is you don't wanna just lean the shoulders forward and close the shoulders. You wanna bring the entire weight of your spine with you when you lean forward. You're gonna bring a lot more weight with you, and it'll be a lot easier for you to come off the wall. That's the toe pull. You need to master that in conjunction with the heel pull, and now you're creating a super nice handstand package. You work on those two things with the kick-ups, and you've got yourself a handstand. But, you know, there's a ton of nuances to it, and you need to make sure that you can bail and you're strong enough to, you know, actually hold yourself up. So that's basically everything that you need to know in order to get your first handstand in terms of drills, what actually a handstand is, how to warm up for it, you know, all the prerequisites. You need to be able to bail. Another thing is you need to be able to kick up against the wall with your back facing the wall like this. If you can't do this, you're gonna need to practice doing that. And then the handstand does require strength. It's not like it requires no strength. You're holding up your body on top of you. If you've never done this before, it's pretty difficult. So in terms of like getting stronger, a lot of the time you can work on a lot of this stuff and you'll get stronger, but doing some specific handstand strength work can also help. So I'd recommend things like doing holds, like chest to wall holds, just walking as close as you can to the wall, and then thinking about the cues that I was talking about earlier, like lifting the shoulders up if you need to, and everyone, whether you're flexible or not, shrugging the shoulders to the ears the entire time as hard as you can. That's a really good place to start. There's also things like trap 3 pull-throughs, which I'll show on the screen now, and things like shrugs that can get you really strong in your traps and more used to this like overhead position. And otherwise, it's just gonna be, you know, weeks and months, maybe years of practicing these drills until you can kick up in the middle of the room. In terms of like timeline, it's kind of hard to say. I've seen some people who have never done a handstand and they get it within 6 weeks. And there are some people who it takes them 2 years. It really just depends on you, how hard you work, and, you know, genetics and how athletic you are. It's kind of hard to put like a timeline on any of this stuff because it's just so specific to the person. Like everyone's gonna be a little bit different in what they need and how long it takes them. But I can guarantee that as long as you have arms and they're working properly, you will be able to do a handstand at some point if you put in the work. Something I do wanna tell you to finish off is your wrists are a limiting factor for this practice. So you wanna make sure that they stay healthy. So you always wanna start on the lower end of things when you're training for the handstand. You know, start with like 2 sessions a week of like 10, 20 minutes. Do that for a couple weeks. If that feels good, your wrists are keeping up fine, throw on another session. Build that up to 3 sessions of 30 minutes. That feels good. Try to do 4 sessions, 30 minutes. That feels good. 4 sessions, 45 minutes. Build that up. And make sure to always warm up your wrists because that stuff will sneak up on you. Seriously, happened to me, which sucks. Yeah, if you like this kind of tutorial video, I'll be making some more like on things like what to do after you get your freestanding handstand,
other skills that are unrelated to handstand, like muscle ups or flexibility work. That's kind of the realm that I'm in right now. So I'll be making some more tutorials on that. So if you like this video, drop a like down below, hit subscribe button, hit the bell. That's so weird. And yeah, thanks for watching. I hope you got some good insight out of this. And leave any comments below, and I'll make sure to get back to you with some responses on any feedback you need or questions you have. Also, if you want to reach out to me, you can find me on Instagram. Bio or my username is just Alex Lighthouse, same as my YouTube channel. And if you're interested in getting a free sample program of kind of putting everything together that I went over in this video, I have like a Google form in the description. You can just put in your email and you'll get added to my newsletter, which sends out free information on developing calisthenics and flexibility skills, and you'll get a free sample program. Thanks for watching, guys.